Chapter 14. Disheveled and exhausted, the semidioses gathered with their parents on the platform in the order in which they had finished. After congratulating him on a job well done, Tio's mother was entirely distracted by his new friend. "What a sweet little thing," Quetzal cooed, gently scratching the back of the Alibrihe's neck as it sat on Tio's shoulder. In return, it made soft and happy murmuring sounds in Tio's ears, its chameleon eyes closing in contentment. But Tio was distracted. Back on the island, the mother Alibrihe paced the bridge. Some of the other dioses guarded it, making sure she didn't cross. She let out a low moan and guilt-churned Tio's stomach. "Please present your Alibrihes," Luna instructed. Diosa Lumbre stood between her son and daughter, stoic and cool as always, but her features softened the slightest bit, nearly impossible to catch, as Aristella presented her Alibrihe. The poor Kotai armadillo was still rolled up in a tight purple ball and trembling as it was presented to Luna in the crowd. Aristella grinned smugly, basking in the fact that she had completed the trial first. Meanwhile, Aurelio's camera-ready smile was missing. His face was taut with concentration as he attempted to wrangle his Alibrihe. The blue gecko growled angrily and kept running across his hands. Aurelio struggled to not drop it. When the gecko spat fire, Aurelio hissed, jerking his hand back. Good, that was what he got for being an ass. But Tio's vindication didn't last long. We saw the way Diosa Lumbre's burning eyes slid to her son. Tio looked for the slightest bit of warmth in her expression as she gazed down at her golden boy, but found only coldness. Tio couldn't imagine anything that would impress, excite, or please her. It actually made him feel sorry for Aurelio. Desi proudly held his green rooster in his arms and nuzzled him, staring up at him with an expression as close to adoring as a bird's face could get. Xochi's goat was still tied up, but had been placated by the bundle of vines Xochi fed him. Marino nearly dropped the orange jackrabbit roadrunner as it kicked furiously. Nia's rhinoceros beetle Javelina was still pissed and letting everyone know from inside the makeshift bowl. Tio was happy Nia had finished, but he was even more relieved that he and Zio had managed not to be last. He was feeling pretty good when it was the younger boy's turn to present his Alibrihe. Carefully, Zio unfolded his jacket. The first hint that something was wrong was that there was no angry chirping. Zio frowned as he carefully opened the jacket, checked the sleeves and then the pockets. Finally, Zio carefully shook it out, but there was no trace of the hummingbird mouse. Tio's heart dropped into his stomach. "Where's the Alibrihe, mijo?" Marla Suerte asked, his voice uncharacteristically soft, but his dark eyes sharp with urgency. Zio shook his head. "I don't know." His cheeks turned splotchy red as he looked up at his dad. Marla Suerte took the jacket and desperately checked all the folds of the material again. "It must have escaped while we were running back," Zio said miserably. The empty jacket fell to the ground. Zio's chin dipped, his massive curls hiding his face. Marla Suerte wrapped his arm around his son's shoulder, pulling him close to his side. The Dios didn't say anything, and the look on his face silently warned others to keep quiet as well. Tio hung his head, feeling horrible. It was his idea to catch the Alibrihe in the jacket. He should have come up with something better. He wanted to give Zio his toucan instead, but he knew Diosa Luna, and more importantly, Sol, wouldn't allow it. Because of him, Zio was bound to get a low rank. "Tio," Quetzal said, gently giving his arm a squeeze. Everyone was watching and waiting for him. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he carefully scooped the baby toucanet in his hand and held it out for Luna to see. It purred and affectionately nipped at his thumb with its large beak. Luna nodded and moved down the line. Tio kept his head down, shoulders hunched up to his ears. While Sella had caught in the Alibrihe, they hadn't gotten back in time. Otzi, looking haggard and worse for wear, was entirely empty-handed. Luna took a moment to reflect before she announced, "Sol has determined the rankings." She gestured toward the stone slate. The golden and jade glyphs took an unbearably slow moment to rearrange themselves. Tio held his breath. Nia screamed and punched the air before grabbing her dad and lifting him off his feet. His arms pinwheeled as she hopped up and down, squeezing him tight. Tio was thrilled for her and wanted to celebrate, but he was distracted trying to make sense of the rankings as hushed whispers broke out among the spectators in the stands. Aristella was seething. Even though Nia had finished way later, she'd somehow been ranked first. Marino had also jumped up in the rankings, right under Aurelio. Perhaps the wildest of all was that Tio had come in 5th. "What the fuck?" Tio said under his breath, as his mom gave him a tight hug. Even Zio had gone up. Not by much, but at least neither of them was in last. He turned to Zio, who looked just as stunned as he felt. "What the fuck?" Zio shook his head, like he couldn't believe it either. He glanced around, trying to gauge the others' reactions. Surprisingly, Aurelio didn't look upset. Instead, it was like he was studying the rankings, trying to figure out the puzzle that everyone was so confused by. Aristella's anger was snuffed out by Asalo's barely contained rage. They were breathing so loud that Tio thought they were going to completely lose their shit, but apparently Asalo had learned their lesson from last time. Or maybe Dioso Guerrero was talking Asalo down, speaking quietly into their ear. Sensing the confusion, Luna addressed the group. Now is a good time to remind you all that rankings aren't determined simply by the order in which you complete the trials, she said with a calm smile as Verdad and Chisme led a very happy Nia over to the reporters. They update based on Soul's evaluation of how you perform throughout the competition. Relief, joy, and frustration all warred inside Tio. How is he supposed to gain the system if there weren't any clear-cut rules? You may release your alebrijes, Diosa Luna instructed. The colorful animals scampered back across the bridge to their mother. When Desi put his bullhorn rooster down, it shook itself out like it had just woken up and scurried away fast. Tio's little toucanet had fallen asleep in his palm, beak nestled under its wing, and Snaketail curled around it like a cat. You gotta go back, Tio said, nudging you with his thumb. You can't stay with me. The toucanet just turned away from him and curled up again. It was pretty cute, but Tio had his hands full taking care of himself. He was not qualified to be responsible for baby Alebrije. From the island, the mother called again, a low-pitched moan. Toucanet poked its head up and looked to where its family waited, then up at Tio again. Go on, then. The Alebrije let out another tiny squawk before clumsily flying back to its mother. What a sweet creature, Diosa Quetzal said with a smile, the feathers of her hair glistening in the afternoon sun. I think you might enjoy Quetzalin. What do you think? She asked Tio, smoothing her hand down his wings in a gesture that made Tio's tense shoulders relax. Maybe. Tio shrugged, giving her a hug before he fell into line behind Luna, making the trek back to the boat. He didn't want to think about home right now, not when there was still a chance he'd never see it again. Nia rejoined them as they headed back to the boat. I can't believe I came in first, she squealed, bouncing as they walked. She grabbed Tio's shoulder and shook him. And you came in fifth! Fifth! She emphasized. You beat out 4 golds, Tio! I know. Tio laughed and shook his head. It was true. He didn't know how, but he had. Suddenly, their plan to beat all the other golds didn't seem so far-fetched. Holy shit, we might actually be able to pull this off! Tio, however, was dead silent, refusing to look up from his feet as they walked. Hey, it'll be okay, Tio said, giving his shoulder a squeeze. Yeah, that was just one bit of bad luck, Nia added. We've still got 3 more trials to get through, Tio told him. There's plenty of time to get you higher in the ranks. Yeah, Zio mumbled, his eyes hidden behind his dark curls. I guess. Tio and Nia exchanged worried looks. It was true, they did have time, but not much. It was almost like the universe was hell-bent on Zio messing up. They had prevented him from being last so far, but how long would the 3 of them be enough to keep that up? I think we all need a good meal, Tio said. And a shower, Nia added. I definitely reek. We could... Hey, rejects! All 3 stopped and turned to see Araceli quickly coming up behind them, chin lifted and fists to her side. Nia groaned. What do you want? Tio snapped, moving to put himself between Zio and Araceli's scorching glare. He was not in the mood to deal with her on top of everything else. Don't you have some baby animals to torment or something? Let me give you some advice for surviving the trials, she said, coming to a stop before them. Araceli's eyes burned into Tio's. First, watch the way you talk to me. Tio scoffed, but she continued without pause. And second, stay out of me and Aurelio's way. How's that going to help me survive the trials? Tio shot back. Araceli took a step closer. It took everything in Tio to not instinctively step back. When she spoke again, her voice was low, deadly, and even. Fuck around and find out, bird boy. With that, she pushed her way between Tio and Nia and strode confidently to where Aurelio was waiting for her at the exit from the arena. Zio gulped. That was terrifying. Hate to admit it, but yeah, Tio agreed, exhaling. Nia stared after her Stella, a pained look on her face. Why does someone so hot have to be so mean? After dinner, the Golds were a lot less braggy and sure of themselves. Instead, they spoke quietly to one another, and any joke met with a half-hearted smile. The reality of the situation, that this wasn't all fun and games, finally seemed to be setting in. 2 of their own were currently in the bottom ranks, and while Tio enjoyed seeing them sweat, it was still too close for comfort. Tio was silent the rest of the night, head down and only responding in hums and single-syllable words. Tio and Nia tried talking him into hanging out and gorging on candy, but Zio said he wanted to be alone and went to bed early. Nia wanted to force Zio to spend time with them, but Tio held her back. The least he could do was to make sure Zio had his space. In the middle of theorizing what the next trial could be, Nia fell asleep at the foot of Tio's bed, surrounded by candy wrappers. Sleep didn't come too easy to Tio so readily. He was exhausted but restless. Instead of disturbing Nia, Tio changed into dim clothes and left her gently snoring in his room. He needed something to distract himself, so he figured the training room would fit the bill. As luck would have it, someone else had the same idea. When he pushed the door, Tio came to an abrupt stop. Aurelio was already there, lying on a bench and pressing weights that were probably 5 times heavier than Tio. He let the door shut with a loud clatter behind him. Aurelio set the bar on the rack and glanced up, catching Teal's reflection in the mirror. He dropped his hands and straddled the bench, looking at Teal expectantly as sweat dripped down the side of his face. Teal pointedly turned away and marched toward... Crap, what was he going to do? What did he even know how to do? A black boxing bag hung in the corner of the room. Boxing didn't sound that hard and seemed unlikely to result in self-injury. Teal closed his hands in a fist and started punching the bag like he'd seen people on TV do. He threw a punch, checking to see how much the bag moved. It hardly budged. It didn't help that Aurelio was staring at him the whole time. He shot Aurelio a glare from over his shoulder. What? He demanded, bracing himself for hostility. He was not in the mood to be made fun of. Teal threw another few punches that barely nudged the bag. You're doing it wrong. Aurelio stood and, with one hand, pulled the bottom hem of his shirt upward to wipe his brow. The gesture was quick, but it was enough to expose almost all of Aurelio's torso, the peaks and valleys of muscle between warm brown skin. When Aurelio's hand fell from his face, Teal made sure he was looking away. Teal scowled. What the fuck? Aurelio looked like an ad from a high-end sportswear company. That's not how you use a heavy bag, Aurelio repeated. He spoke calmly and evenly, leveling Teal a vaguely annoyed look. It's a bag full of sand, and you punch it, Teal said, pulling back his right arm. I think it can manage. You're supposed to wear gloves or wrap your hands, Aurelio explained that like he was giving a lesson, but Teal wasn't interested. He rolled his eyes and threw his right fist in the bag as hard as he could. Pain exploded down his thumb. Son of a... And never tuck your thumb, Aurelio added. Teal hissed between his teeth and shook out his throbbing hand. Aurelio sighed and crossed the room. I tried to tell you. You think you're so great, huh? Teal spun to face Aurelio, stopping him dead in his tracks. Golden boy Aurelio, son of Dios Alumbre, he said, feigning awe as he wiggled his fingers. Aurelio's posture went rigid, eyebrows bunching. Aurelio was way closer than Teal had expected. It took a moment to recalibrate in the face of all that skin, sweaty and right there and smelling faintly of campfire smoke and cinnamon. Teal shook his head to clear it and puffed up his chest, refusing to let himself feel small. I bet I could take you one-on-one. Aurelio exhaled, a short snort, like he couldn't tell if Teal was being serious or not. Come on, Teal coaxed, raising his fist in what he hoped looked like a boxing stance as he bounced back and forth on the balls of his feet. I may not be a gold, but I am scrappy. Aurelio gave him a withering look. You'd rather fight me than let me help you? Yep, Teal confirmed, popping the pea. Was he stronger than Aurelio? No. Was he a good fighter? Also no. But he was still going to irritate Aurelio into a fight anyway? Absolutely. Teal flashed a sarcastic smile. I bet you'd love to get your hands on me. Aurelio only hummed in response. Let's go, golden boy. Teal didn't get to finish his sentence. In a flash, Aurelio swept his legs out from under him, the same move Teal tried to pull on him during the second trial. Teal landed hard on his back, knocking the wind out on him. His wings did very little to cushion the blow and ached under the force of his weight. Teal let out a groan as he struggled to get back on his feet. That looked like it hurt, Aurelio said, extending his hand to help Teal up. That's because it did hurt, Teal shot back, knocking Aurelio's hand out of the way as he scrambled to stand up on his own. Do you ever take those stupid things off? Teal said, motioning to the gold bands locked around Aurelio's forearms. Aurelio stood straighter. No. Teal winced as he reached back to rub his very sore wings. That commits the aesthetic, huh? A strangled yelp shot out of Teal's throat as he was knocked down again. Aurelio had dropped him onto one knee, the material of Teal's shirt bunched in his fists as he pinned Teal's shoulder to the ground. Teal grappled for the armbands. The gold was cool against his fingers, but heat radiated from Aurelio's skin. Teal's chest heaved up and down, breath audible. Aurelio wasn't even winded. His russet brown eyes stared down at Teal, a hint of a smile hidden behind them. Teal pressed his lips together, his pulse thudding in his neck. Just as quickly as he knocked Teal down, Aurelio got back on his feet. You're not very good at this, he said, frowning down at Teal where he lay spread out on the mat. I'm just warming up. Teal scrambled back to his feet, luring you into a false sense of security. Aurelio sighed. Do you have to make everything into a competition? Teal let out a sharp laugh. Look who's talking! I can't tell if this is your strange way of trying to be helpful, or if you're just a douche. The haircut doesn't help, he added. Aurelio jerked back like Teal had struck him. This is the traditional warrior knot the heroes of Dios Alumbre have worn for centuries. It's literally a man bun, my guy. Teal had never seen Aurelio look so disgruntled. It was incredibly gratifying. Did I hit a soft spot? Are you mad? Teal tipped his head to the side and stuck his bottom lip out. You look mad. Aurelio huffed. Shut up. Teal grinned. Make me. In a flash, Teal was thrown backward off his feet once again. This time, when he hit the floor, he let out a pained cry. Ah! Poor, unsuspecting Aurelio rushed forward, rushing down to help him up. Are you... Tio grabbed Aurelio's arm as he bent down, using the momentum to tug him off balance. Using all this strength, he flipped Aurelio over and pinned him onto his back. Aurelio sucked in a breath, surprise etched into his features. Tio smirked triumphantly down at him. Told you I was scrappy. Aurelio swallowed hard before asking, scrappy enough to get through the trials? For a second, he'd been able to pretend that they were kids again, that they were still friends, that Aurelio wasn't basically a stranger to him now, that they weren't in the trials. Tio's heart sank. He pushed away from Aurelio and got back on his feet. You girls are really obsessed with being a Sunbearer, huh? He said gruffly, stretching out his wings before folding them against his back again. He frowned at Aurelio as the other boy slowly got back up to his feet. I mean, seems pretty stupid to me, blindly following orders, putting yourselves in danger because your mom told you to. Aurelio's expression shuddered. It was a subtle shift in his posture, one that Tio couldn't name if he had to, but Aurelio was back into performing. Sol chose us for a reason, he said. I would gladly give my own life to maintain peace and prosperity in Reino del Sol. Really? That's funny, Tio challenged, taking a step forward. He heard the venom in his own voice. That's not how I remember the last Sunbearer ceremony. The muscles in Aurelio's shoulders tightened. Tio clenched his hands into fists at his sides. I still remember how scared you were. When they were 7, Tio and Aurelio had watched the Sunbearer trials together. Hugh had volunteered to look after them, which mostly meant managing Tio's mischief. He hadn't understood what the trials were. Not really, but he knew they meant playing tag with Aurelio far away in the stands where his mom had sent them, and Hugh bribing them with candied pecans if they could just sit still for 5 minutes. When they were paying attention, both he and Aurelio thought the trials were cool and exciting. The competitors seemed so big, strong, and grown-up. Nowhere else could they see so many semidioses flexing all their powers at once. It was awe-inspiring, seeing what Tio thought he would become when he got older. But when the trials were finished and it was time for the Sunbearer ceremony, Tio's mom kept him away. As they stood around the soul stone, waiting for the ceremony to be completed, Quetzal circled her wings around Tio like a cocoon. When it ended, Tio wanted to find Aurelio so that they could play on the steps of his temple, but his mom held steadfast to his hand. Confused, Tio looked around. Brave Nia stood stick straight, eyes wide and lips pressed into a tight line. Her tiny fist was balled up on her dad's pant leg, holding on for dear life as he led her back into the temple. When Tio spotted Aurelio, he was crying uncontrollably, empty hands rubbing his eyes as tears sped down his cheeks. Tio tried to go to Aurelio and ask what was wrong, but Diosa Lumbre flicked her wrist dismissively and a priestess ushered Aurelio away, just a small boy in a circle of towering priests in black robes. Tio didn't understand. He tried to look back at the altar to see what had happened, but his mom's huge wings blocked his view, gently sweeping him toward the temple with promises of pan dulce's hot chocolate before bed. It was strange to see the same boy before him now, someone Tio had known for so long, which meant so much to him then, but was a complete stranger today, familiar but unrecognizable. Their friendship was now the ghost of a memory that left nothing but a dull ache in his chest. So, what changed between then and now? Tio asked. The delicate skin around Aurelio's flinty eyes bunched in a pained stare. His shoulders lifted in a defeated shrug. Everything. Looking back, that had been the beginning of the end. It was the first glimpse of the future that was awaiting them. They went their separate ways for good when Aurelio started the academy. He had become untouchable, and Tio had become, well, just Tio. And now they were here, trapped in the trials together. I was only a child back then, Aurelio tried to explain. I didn't understand the importance of the trials. Tio rolled his eyes. It was an honor to win or lose. It's an honor to let yourself get murdered? Tio heard himself shout, his fist trembling at Tio heard himself shout, his fist trembling at his sides. It's an honor to die in order to keep my people safe, Aurelio shot back. Tio recoiled a step. He never actually heard Aurelio raise his voice in anger before. The back of Tio's throat burned and his eyes stung treacherously. It had been so easy to keep it together during the trials and in the face of Estella and Aristella, but now Tio felt himself crumbling. Aurelio closed his eyes and took a slow, deep breath. I'm just trying to help you, he said slowly, evenly. Tio shook his head. Why? Aurelio gave him a tired look. Because it's not a fair fight. Tio remembered what he'd said the other night, how Jade shouldn't compete in the trials. Aurelio didn't want an easy win. He wanted Tio to up his game, to even the playing field. A fair fight, Tio repeated, thoughtful. As much as he didn't want Aurelio's pity, Tio also knew that his friends were relying on him. He promised to look after Zio and keep him from the bottom of the ranks, and so far he'd done a really shitty job of it. Okay, he said after a moment. Okay, Aurelio said, like he thought it was another one of Tio's pranks. Okay, he repeated, lifting his chin. Just don't cry when suddenly I'm kicking your ass in the trials. A surprise laugh dropped in Aurelio's chest, a small, relieved sound. Come on, he said, whipping him back toward the heavy bag. I'll show you how to throw a punch without breaking your thumb. Oh, he's got jokes now, Tio grinned, falling a step next to Aurelio. Here I thought they made you handle your personality when you started the academy. Aurelio rolled his eyes, but the hint of a smile turned to the corner of his lips. Don't make me embarrass you again. Chapter 15. The two of them trained late into the night and early the next morning. Tio was even more sore than yesterday, but Aurelio's encouragement made him feel energized and ready for the next trial. Instead of dragging his feet into the shower, Tio was up and ready before Zio and Nia. "You're in a good mood," Zio said, watching from across the table. The younger boy had deep purple bags under his dark eyes. Tio wondered how much sleep he'd gotten in the last 3 days. Not much, by the looks of it. A pang of guilt twitched in Tio's chest. He flattened a smile out between his teeth. "I guess so," he said with a casual shrug. Nia jolted. "Why? Did I miss out on something fun last night?" she demanded, voice rising through a mouthful of rice, eggs, beans, and potatoes. "You didn't," Tio assured her before she got too worked up. "I was just practicing with my wings and stuff." Nia choked, sending bits of food shooting from her mouth. "You were what?" she choked out. "You, Tio, were working out?" Tio leveled her with a flat expression. "Nia, did someone force you against your will? You're not funny." She shrugged. Zio's laughing. Tio took the drug in order to keep her from asking more questions. Aurelio was still their competition, and he didn't want Zio and Nia to think he was a traitor. He waited until Zio came back to poking his plate of food with a fork, and Nia was off on a tangent about the dream she had last night to steal a glance behind the table at Aurelio. Aristella had her elbow on the table, and chin propped in her hand as she spoke to her brother. Aurelio listened, head bobbing in agreement to whatever scheme she was probably plotting for the next trial. His gaze shifted past her shoulder, catching Tio's eye. Tio held his breath, but the glance was fleeting, which was fine, really. It wasn't like Tio expected their secret training session would change anything. Even if he wasn't completely awful, Aurelio was different now, as was Tio, and one night wasn't going to change that, no matter how much he wished it had. They each had their own agenda. Tio would use Aurelio's advice to perform better in the trial so he could help himself and Zio. He was only doing it to help satiate whatever moral reasoning he needed to feel like his success in the trials was earned. It wasn't a big deal. Tio wouldn't let himself read into it. It was just a way to help him get ahead. Another city met another outfit change. They had been invited to tour the Alibreje sanctuary, one of the many Alvalle was famous for, before going to Fauna's temple for dinner. All 10 competitors were given simple brown suits and chaquetelas. Tias, I think. The trousers, Tio's had been altered to allow his wings through, which he did willingly. The trousers had all-round silhouettes of all kinds of animals running down the sides in suede fretwork. The only pop of color was the Quetzal glyph embroidered onto Tio's lapel. Even though he felt incredibly fancy dressed up in such a fine suit, it was far from Tio's favorite look. With the heavy fabric, silk mono tie, and sombrero, it was absolutely sweltering. "I feel going to sweat to death," Tio complained as they lined up in the common room. He could already hear the crowd of people cheering their arrival. "I think mine's too big," Zio said, pushing sombrero off his forehead only for it to slip back down over his eyebrows again. "How does anyone get anything done in these?" Nia growled, tugging at her clothes like some feral cat. "The ladies need to breathe." "Which ladies?" Tio asked, looking back at her as he tried to loosen his tie. "These!" Nia flexed her biceps, muscles strained against the fabric of the jacket. "The titties aren't doing great either, though," she said, glancing down at her chest. "I can't tell you how much underboob sweat I've got right now." Okay. The other girls weren't faring much better. So she was struggling to find a way to incorporate flowers into her outfit, and the Stella's hat was too small for their big head. Aurelio's sleeves wouldn't fit over his golden armbands, so he had them unbuttoned and rolled up to his elbows, which looked ridiculous, if you asked Tio. He figured that after spending most of the time in their Spanx Academy uniforms, these jocks felt overwhelmingly restricted in suits. The only ones who had looked unbothered were Aristella, whose suit fit like a glove, and Desi, but he looked perfect in a paper bag. In front, Aristella waved enthusiastically, getting a first wave of cheers as they walked out into the dock. Halfway down the ramp, Nia kicked off her boots and proceeded barefoot. People paused to cheer and waved to the competitors as they walked the main road through the city. Luna led them through a traffic jam that had been caused by a large deer standing in the middle of the street, contentedly chewing on a mouthful of hay. The commuters didn't seem particularly bothered. They waited patiently in their cars and followed the instructions of Fauna Priest, redirecting the vehicle so as not to disturb the beast. Tio saw animal companions everywhere, which made him deeply homesick. His chest ached watching a girl cross the street with a cat riding in her backpack, and again when they passed a panaderia where a man and a sloth shared a muffin. The Alibreje sanctuary was massive. Fauna Priest led them around the campus on a tour. They showed the Semidiosis, the veterinary clinic where injured and sick Alibrejes were tended to with state-of-the-art technology. A priest was explaining in a monotone In a monotone, the various diets they provided for the different Alibrijes in the kitchens when Tio's attention wandered out the wide windows. Outside, there was a fenced-in area. Much like the spa in La Cumbre, the sanctuary thus far had been empty to visitors for their private tour. But here, there were actual people. Not priests in robes, but parents, teens, and loads of kids. Just normal people. "What's that?" Tio asked, interrupting the priest mid-sentence. "That's our petting zoo," he said, the annoyance clear in his voice. "One of the many ways we raise money for the sanctuary. People can pay to come feed Alibrijes that wouldn't be able to survive alone in the wild. It's a very popular field trip destination." Tio smiled. "Awesome, let's check it out!" "Well, wait," the priest called after him. "You're not—" But Tio didn't listen. He pushed the doors and out into the sunlight, Zio and Nia following without question. This looked way more fun than listening to the boring old tour guide. Can we feed the Alibrijes? Tio asked the priestess at the entrance to the small yard. When she turned and saw Tio, her eyes went wide, quickly darting among the three of them. "Oh!" She blinked rapidly. You want to?" "If we can," Tio asked, exchanging confused looks with Zio. He didn't understand the startled look on her face. "They're so cute!" Nia lamented, her fingers hooked into the fencing. This caught the attention of the people inside. When they saw that trio, kids and adults alike shared the same surprised look. "Oh, I can try to clear everyone out," the priestess said hurriedly, motioning to a couple other priests standing by for their help. "You don't have to make them leave," Tio told her with an uncertain laugh. This seemed to fluster the woman even more. Are you sure? We're not contagious." He laughed. "And Nia might not be able to wait," he added, gesturing to Nia, whose fingers were shoved through the chain-link fence, reaching desperately for a maroon porcupine with an ostrich neck. The priestess still looked worried. "All of you?" she asked, looking past his shoulder. The other competitors had joined them outside, awkwardly lingering. Tio had never seen the goats look so unsure of themselves. "Looks like it." The priestess flushed, and she and her helpers tripped over themselves to hand each of them a paper cup packed with nutrient-rich pellets. Nia charged in first, followed by Tio and Zio. The adult chaperones and kids got to the sudden appearances of the semidioses. Nia didn't seem to notice as she ran around trying to get the colorful Alibrijes to accept her love. A few kids giggled uncontrollably. Tio fed pieces of food from his palm to a rainbow-colored llama with bat wings while Zio stood nearby. "What are they waiting for?" Tio looked to where he pointed. The rest of the goats stood along the back fence, looking around. Tio shook his head. "I have no idea." "Are they afraid of the Alibrijes?" Zio wondered as the llama munched happily. "No, that doesn't make sense. They'd had no problem going after the Alibrijes during the trials. So what was so different now?" That was when Tio realized their worried glances weren't directed at the Alibrijes, but at adults and children standing nearby. A surprised slap bucked in his chest. "Have you guys ever interacted with mortals before?" Tio asked as he walked back over the group. They exchanged concerned looks. Marino's mouth opened. Who weren't priests," Tio specified. His mouth closed. "We literally save mortals every day," Aristella snapped, trying to maintain her haughty demeanor. Tio could see through the cracks of her facade. "Sure, but have you actually talked to one?" Tio pressed. Aristella rolled her eyes and turned away. Tio laughed and shook his head. "They're not going to bite." To prove his point, he walked over to a group of kids who were fighting over a small donkey with green fur and rough frog eyes. Slowly, everyone seemed to loosen up. The Alibrijes didn't care who they were. Desi and Marina were the first to step away from the fence, and the animals came swarming for their cups of food. A bright pink flying squirrel with the head of an axolotl took quickly to Desi, when an overly enthusiastic pig with yellow and green scales bowled over Marina. Some of the parents were rushed to help him up. It was long before the kids got brave enough to come up and start asking the semidioses hundreds of questions. The little boy and girl complimented Otzi's braids and the flowers in Xochi's hair. The latter got so flattered she immediately grew some orchids right there in the tankard to give out. Everyone got into it, talking with the kids and even pulling off some full conversations with the parents. Only Aristella and Estella refused to participate, so deciding to get frutas con chile from the small snack stand. Tio grabbed their pellet cups from where they had abandoned them on the fence and told some of the kids to gather up. He walked down the line, placing some food on their hands and shoulders so a group of flying Alibrijes immediately swarmed them. The kids dissolved into fits of laughter as the Alibrijes' feathers tickled their cheeks. When a little boy, startled by an aggressive monkey cat, dropped his pellets and began to cry, Aurelio hesitantly approached and offered him his cup. Tio couldn't help smiling, and his stomach, but the trier it was, did a little flip. "I love them so much!" Nia whined, practically melting into a gooey puddle as one of the priests showed the group some rainbow-colored baby rabbit doves that had just hatched. "How did you get a pet Alibrije?" "Oh, they're not pets," the priest explained. "Lots of Alibrijes wandered to the southern cities from Los Restos. Usually we scoop them up and release them again, but a few got hurt and needed to be rehabilitated, like these four." "So you take care of them?" Tio asked. He nodded. "Just until they're strong enough to go home." "I want to take care of Alibrijes when I grow up," a little boy announced as he gently petted one of the tiny balls of fur. I want to be a Sunbearer, a girl with curly hair said, beaming up at Nia. The knot twisted in Teo's stomach. He thought of his conversation with Aurelia. Araceli whispered something behind her hand to her brother and Acello, sniggering cruelly at the silly little mortal girl. But Nia returned her smile. Me too! After thanking the workers of the sanctuary and saying bye to their new friends, Alibrije and Mortal alike, it was finally time to head to Fauna Temple, which Teo had first mistook for a tall hill in the middle of the city. Instead of stone or steel with sharp edges, the walls of Fauna's temples were covered in moss and grass. Massive trees grew on the structure, their thick, twisted branches providing support and homes for more wildlife. As they approached, Teo realized animals of all shapes and varieties were carved into every bit of wood. Instead of the iconic stone steps that led to the observatories of most temples, Fauna's was a grassy, sloped ramp. At the top, the Lavaje stone beamed to the orange-painted sunset sky. They cut through the main courtyard, a series of wooden rope footbridges suspended over water while manatees crunched in whole heads of lettuce fed to them by priests. Mind your step, Luna warned as they entered the ground floor, where they found animals roaming the halls freely. Birds nested in wooden houses along the walls, but Teo had to keep his eyes on the ground because tiny mice and dwarf porcupines scurried across the stone floors, a skunk waddling after them in an attempt to keep up. They started up a set of stairs. Each floor they passed was devoted to a different ecosystem or climate. There was even an entire level containing a full-on aquarium. How do they not eat each other? Nia asked as they walked the jungle level where spider monkeys chased one another around a dozen ocelot. Fauna, Zio said, as that explained everything. When Neo and Teo gave him a blank look, he grinned. She's a calming presence for animals, so when they're in her temple, they're super chill and relaxed. Neo turned to Teo. Do you feel super chill and relaxed? Teo scowled. I'm not an animal. Well, technically, Zio began, but Teo didn't let him finish. I'm not a bird, he specified. I've got wings, yes, but the rest of me is 100% human. You're also half god, though, Zio pointed out. So you're like 25% human, 25% bird, and 25% bird god, Nia said, counting off on her fingers. That's only 75%, Zio told her. She's terrible at math, Teo whispered. Teo? Nia stomped her foot. You know that's what I'm sensitive about? Laughter shook Teo's voice when he tried to apologize. I'm sorry. She sharply turned away from him, one of her braids flicking his cheek. And 25% dumbass, how's that? Teo and Zio chased after Nia, singing her praises to get back on her good side. By the time they made it to their destination, she'd gotten over it. The dining hall in the Elevalhai Temple was smaller than Locumbre's, but no less grand. The walls were lined with golden statues of animals, from a tiny mouse on a pedestal to a huge crocodile. The heavy wooden table in the center of the room was carved from a single tree, its many franks showing the centuries it had taken for a tree to grow to that size. Fauna's priests dressed in soft, wheat-colored robes stood in two lines, waiting to assist. Two women Teo didn't recognize stood by the head of the table, flanking the goddess herself. Welcome, competitors! Fauna greeted them in a soft voice. It was so soothing that Teo found the tension in his shoulders and wings melting away until he was standing there and smiling at her like a weirdo, but he couldn't help himself. Thank you for having us, Diosa, Luna said. Fauna smiled back. My daughters, Catalina and Alejandra, are equally pleased to meet you as well. She gestured to the young woman at her sides. Catalina nodded in greeting. She wore a suit that was nearly identical to the ones they'd been outfitted with. Judging by the way she held herself, with her hands clasped behind her back, Teo got the vibe that she was pretty serious, which was in stark contrast to her sister. Alejandra was shorter and far less severe. She wore a lumpy fur coat, which seemed weird considering the heat. There were bits of dry grass, twigs, and tufts of lint stuck in the fur in her tangled hair. Her smile was bright and beaming as she waved enthusiastically at them. Nia was the only one to wave back. Please, have a seat, Fauna said. I'm sure you're all tired and hungry. Do they know these semidiosas? Teo whispered to Zio as they took their seats. Catalina is one of the most decorated active semidiosas in Reina del Sol. She is the captain of the all-femme horse riders, Fauna Genetes, who escorted us to the trial, Zio explained. They do search and rescue missions in places with difficult terrain like the mountains or desert, and they also respond to any emergency situations where animals are involved, like stampedes or if something dangerous wanders into a city. What about Alejandra? Nia asked, nodding to where she sat across the table. Zio shrugged and shook his head. Never heard of her. So is Fauna like your grandma? Nia asked Teo. He gave her a confused look. What? I mean, she's the diosa of animals, right? Nia reasoned as Fauna priests brought out food on large platters. Your mom is the diosa of birds. You're thinking of it like a family structure, Zio interrupted. It's more like a corporate ladder. My mom reports to Fauna, Teo agreed. We're not related. But he was still distracted by Alejandra. Maybe it was a trick of the light, but Teo could have sworn he saw something in her coat move. When a plate of rolls was set on the table, Alejandra picked one up and tore off pieces before placing them in her upturned palm. That time, Tio definitely saw something under her coat move. What the? 3 small, fluorescent-colored creatures ran out of her sleeve. Aristella, who was sitting next to Alejandra, gasped and jerked away, bumping into Aurelio and spilling the glass of water he'd been about to drink. "What are those?" Aristella shrieked. Aurelio made a disgruntled face and started carefully soaking up the water in his lap with a napkin. "Oh, they're just my friends," Alejandra said, smiling down at the tiny creatures that she didn't notice. Aristella freaking out. In Alejandra's hand, a neon purple axolotl with crab claws tore their roll into tinier pieces, with a bright blue ringtail cat pocket gopher nibbled on their share, and a chartreuse gecko millipede with several tiny suction cup feet gummed a hunk of bread. Tio grinned. "We met a bunch at the sanctuary," he said, leaning as far forward as he could to get to a better look. Aristella grabbed her brother's arm, forcing him to switch seats with her. "Ale," Catalina chided, while Fauna and Luna were deep in conversation at the end of the table. Do you have to let them on the table?" "Don't worry, they're completely harmless," Alejandra said, ignoring her sister. A gecko millipede waddled over to Aurelio with its many feet. It stared up at him and wiggled its tiny body, tail whipping while it made a strange croaking noise. "Pepe likes you," Alejandra told him. Tio watched as Aurelio hesitantly reached out. Immediately, the alebrije, Pepe, flipped onto his back, exposing a lemon-yellow belly. Aurelio tickled him with his pointer finger, and Pepe squirmed and gurgled happily. Aurelio chuckled, a warm sound from deep in his chest, a rare and fleeting phenomena that Tio hadn't witnessed in years. "That's Gigi and that's Lola," Alejandra said as she pointed at the ring-tailed cat pocket gopher, and then the cat axolotl. But then she frowned. Where's Mauricio?" Upon hearing his name, a tiny bright pink rabbit stuck its head out of Alejandra's sleeve, blinking sleepily. "There he is," Alejandra smiled. Mauricio crawled out onto the table. A pink rabbit was shocking enough, but that did nothing to prepare Tio for the sets of long flamingo legs that followed. A laugh jumped into Tio's throat. He clamped his hand over his mouth. "Oh my gods!" Standing on his thin little legs, Mauricio wobbled a bit. Tio held out a piece of bread and the alebrije's nose went wild, suddenly very awake as he took the offer and nibbled away. "I help out at the sanctuary most days," Alejandra explained. "If there are smaller ones who need more one-on-one attention, I usually take them home and help socialize them before they're ready to join the other alebrijes who can't be returned to the wild." "Did they teach you that at the academy?" Tio asked, trying to picture it. Alejandra laughed. "Oh no, I found out a couple of years in," she said. "Being a hero wasn't for me, so I went to veterinarian school instead and took a liking to alebrijes." Tio nodded and tried not to look annoyed. Apparently some golds went to the academy when they didn't even want to, but still refused jades. Fauna priests brought out the main courses, careful not to disturb Mauricio, who had fallen asleep standing with one of his legs tucked under him. "Whoa!" Let's try this again. "Whoa," Nia said as spiced, cooked meats paired with heavy vegetables. "I figured everything would be vegan," she added, loud enough that it gained Fauna's attention. "We care for and respect animals here," Fauna said, "including their sacrifices. We honor animals by making use of every part of them, and our clothes, our textiles, our food. Our winter coats are made of fur and insulated with feathers. We even use dried dung to fuel our fires." "Doesn't that stink up the temple?" Otzi asked, too bewildered to censor herself. Fauna smiled. "We specifically use herbivores, so only it smells like burning grass." Otzi looked very impressed. Meanwhile, Tio saw Araceli mouth the word, "Ew." "The outfits we gave you are made with the same principles," Fauna went on, gesturing to Desi as Luna translated for him. "They're sewn together with needles made from bones and sinew used as thread. The buttons are made from antlers, the belts are rawhide, and your shoes are tan leather. Even the sombreros are made from horse and rabbit hair." "This has got to be the most sustainable city in Reino del Sol," Xochitl said as she marveled at the stitching on her hat. "Easily," Fauna said with a grin. It was obvious she took great pride in it. "We don't want any creature sacrificed to go to waste, whether it was food, clothing, decorations, or tools." Her large eyes shifted to Tio. "Even your hollow bones, Tio, would make beautiful flutes." Tio watched as everyone turned to look at him. "Do you have hollow bones?" Marino asked in awe. Yeah," Tio stammered. "Is that why you're so light and easy to throw around?" Nia demanded. "No, you're just freakishly strong," he told her. "You're practically an alebrije yourself," Alejandra pointed out. Nia gripped the table, as if seeing Tio in a bright, brand-new light. "Oh my gods! She's right!" Zio gasped. Tio's mouth froze and his stomach churned as the whole table exploded with questions. "Are you hatched from an egg?" Otzi asked excitedly. "Do you perch?" Xochitl wondered aloud. "Yeah, like if I put a stick against the bottom of your foot, would you just—" Marino made a gripping gesture with his hands. "Do you eat bugs?" Estella asked with a snort. Tio's face burned red. "No!" Desi said something to Marino, who shook his head and signed something back, which somehow felt worse than knowing what they were actually saying. Alejandro leaned across the table and tried to whisper, but everyone was listening, paying close attention. Do you have a cloaca? Cloaca? What? Catalina sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. Too far again, ally. Ally? Yeah, that makes sense. Teo leapt up from his seat, his wings knocking his toe over. Excuse me, he murmured before bolting for the door. His heart rippled in his chest, humiliation coursing through his veins. Once in the hallway, Teo slipped onto a couch, sitting against a wall, and put his face in his hands. Why was it that just because his body was different from everyone else's, that they could ask whatever inappropriate questions they wanted? You guys went too far, he heard Nia declare from the dining hall. The doors flew open and Nia stomped into the corridor. When she spotted Teo, she plopped down next to him. You okay? She asked, slightly nudging his shoulder. I guess, he grumbled before letting his hands drop to his lap. I didn't mean to embarrass you, she said, guiltily tugging on one of her braids. I know you didn't. Teo took a deep breath and exhaled through his nose. Just tired of feeling like a freak of nature compared to everyone else. I'm sorry. I know. Teo leaned back and tried to give her a smile. Thanks for apologizing. Nia curled up and tucked her legs under her. Hey, Teo? She turned her cheek against the back of the couch and stared up at him. What's a cloaca? Teo shoved her off the couch. Back on the boat, Teo had changed and was digging around in the bag of candy, which was mostly wrappers now, when there was a light knock on his door. Hey, Teo? Zio poked his head in. Can I ask you something? Teo Hinkley chucked a pillow onto the floor. I don't have a cloaca! He barked. Zio blinked. Not that. Oh. Teo relaxed. Sorry, I'm just... He shook his head clear. What's up? Zio stepped into his room and closed the door behind him. He was already in his pajamas, an oversized long-sleeved shirt and sleep shorts, and his tangled mess of curls made Teo wonder if he'd gotten out of bed to come talk to him. I was just wondering. Zio twisted his sleeves under his fingers. Not looking Teo in the eyes, he inched closer. Teo tipped his head curiously. Zio was acting even more cagey and uncomfortable than usual, which was saying something. So you're like trans and stuff? Zio suddenly blurted out, his cheeks bright red. Oh, this is going to be a talk. A amused grin tugged his lips. Teo plopped himself down in his bed. What questions you got for me? Teo's shoulders slumped. He looked relieved but still unsure. What's like that? Being on T? Mostly sweaty and a little smelly, he said, which earned him a laugh. It was a very broad question, but Teo tried to come up with something useful. The last thing he wanted to do was scare Zio off. It's good, I guess? I didn't figure out my gender stuff until I was 15. My Kinsey's and gender confirmation ceremony happened in the same week. I remember, Zio said quickly. He cleared his throat. That was kind of a big deal for me, he confessed, trying to sound casual. Kind of helped me work up the nerve to have mine last year. Teo had never been so flattered in his life. I also remember, he bounced back, when a Semediose discovered their gender didn't align with the one they were raised, as the gender confirmation ceremony was celebrated like any birthday. The ceremonies were even a bigger deal than Kinsey's because it was such an important acknowledgement and celebration for the community. I don't know, it's like... When Zio spoke, the words were erected at his feet. He was unable to meet Teo's gaze. It's like seeing you helping me understand something about myself, I guess. I've kind of always felt like I wasn't entirely myself, but couldn't figure out why, you know? He cut Teo a nervous glance. I absolutely know. Teo had spent so many years feeling confused and lost, like he was wearing his shoes on the wrong feet, but constantly with a lot more emotional breakdowns. I started taking testosterone a few months after my ceremony, Teo guessed, trying to piece together the timeline. I didn't work up the nerve because I was so freaked out by needles, he confessed, but now it's like nothing. And you got top surgery. Teo nodded. Last year. And that felt right? Holy shit, it was like night and day. Teo laughed. He could still feel the relief seeing himself flat-chested. The clothes I wanted to wear finally looked right and felt right, he said. The only downside was that my wings didn't transition along with the rest of me. So while I didn't have to wear a chest binder anymore, I had to wear one to hide my wings because seeing them made me feel so... He searched for the right word. Dysphoric? Zio guessed. Exactly. But now they're perfect, and I can't stop staring at them, Teo said, finally catching his reflection in the mirror across the room. I don't know why they took so long. Transitioning never one clean and clear shift, you know? It doesn't happen overnight. Teo shrugged. It's just as much mental as it is physical, I guess. Puberty was a bitch, he added. Seriously! Zio finally approached the bed and stood next to Teo. It changed everything, he said, face pinched like he was in physical pain. You mean you got your period? Teo guessed. Yeah, Zio said, rubbing the back of his neck. He looked like he hadn't had a good night's rest in 2 years. It showed me pretty much everything I hated most about myself. It's a really tough time for me. My period went away a few months after I started tea, Tio said, trying to be helpful. I'm not on tea, Zio said, toying with his bracelet again. Blockers? Tio guessed. He shook his head. Maybe he was being short-sighted. Do you want to be? Zio nodded vehemently, sending his curls bouncing. Then why aren't you? My dad is weird with medical stuff. Tio frowned. Something wasn't adding up. Transitioning genders was common and completely natural. Tio never heard of someone being against, especially not a god. But you had your gender confirmation ceremony. He doesn't have anything against it, Tio rushed to clarify. It's really doctors he doesn't trust. I guess bringing bad luck into hospital is kind of a bad idea. I guess. It still didn't sit right. I feel like there's still parts of me people can't see or understand, Tio explained. I never felt like I belong or fit in anywhere, and not just because I'm a jade. I'm still not sure who I am. Tio racked his brain, trying to figure out what that meant. Oh, do you mean you're maybe like agender or bigender or non-binary or something? Zio lifted his shoulders in a weak shrug. Something like that. Would you like it if I used they-them pronouns for you? Tio suggested. Maybe that would help. I'm not sure yet. You know, not fitting into a gender binary is a total normal thing, Tio went on. I mean, Soul, literally our greatest and most powerful god, our damn creator, is non-binary. It's pretty badass if you ask me, Tio said, giving Zio a playful nudge. Zio had a small laugh, but Tio could tell he was still bothered. Well, it's okay if you haven't figured yourself out yet, he told the younger boy, trying to be reassuring. You have literally all the time in the world. Zio's expression fell and Tio's heart sank. Zio thought he was destined to die, just like the other Jades, just like Paloma. Hey, don't, Tio started, but Zio cut him off. Well, thanks for talking to me, Zio said, suddenly getting to his feet. It let me, be awkward at you. He forced a laugh. I'm really tired now, though. We've got a big day tomorrow. Zio stretched and yawned. It was very obviously fake, but Tio didn't want to push him to talk about something when he wasn't ready. He'd have to just play the long game. Okay, he conceded. Thank you. And sorry, Zio added quickly added. Anyway, bye. Or good night, I guess. He gave Tio a jerky wink before disappearing out the door. Tio crawled into bed. He crawled into his side and scoured Tutube any videos he could find of Paloma. Did she have any friends during the trials? Was she like Zio, lonely and scared? The ache in Tio's chest was dull and all-consuming. Zio probably thought these trials would cut short his time to figure out who he was. Well, Tio wasn't going to let that happen. The future wasn't decided yet. There were 10 competitors in these trials for a reason. Couldn't be true for all of them, but Tio was going to make sure Zio got to go home and have the life he deserved. Chapter 16. The third trial will be held in the Opal Oasis and hosted by Dios Guerrero, Luna announced the next morning at breakfast. The cells slammed their hands at the table, sending silverware clattering. Yes! That's not fair, Nia mocked in a whiny voice. Cello glared at her. The Opal Oasis was located southwest of El Valle. As they made their way along the water, the terrain on the coast shifted from grassy plains to flat desert. It quickly became too hot to hang out on the deck, so they all moved inside and drank chilled juice in the air-conditioned common room until they entered the shade of a canyon. The river rolled back and forth between steep cliff faces. Here, the water was a bright turquoise blue, brilliant against the red and orange striped rock formations. Slowly, plump cacti and green shrubs popped up along the river until they left the canyon behind and the view opened up, revealing the Opal Oasis. Now, this was what Tio expected a Gold City to look like. It was a massive spot of sprawling green in the middle of the arid desert, built around a freshwater spring fed by aquifers. Bushy palm groves grew between huge buildings made mostly of glass and gold plating. In the setting sun, the city sparkled in shades of blue, green, pink, and orange. It reminded Tio of fire opals, which he supposed were how the war city got its name. The people of the Opal Oasis took great pride in their city. It was common to hear them brag about how only the strongest could survive and thrive in one of the most uninhabitable places on the planet. The crown jewel of the city was Dios Guerrero's golden temple, sitting on a bank of the aquamarine spring. The sun glimmered against the gold so brilliantly that it hurt Tio's eyes to look at it directly. The boat had to slow its pace upon approach. Since the city was so isolated, there was constant traffic of ships bringing in cargo through engineered canals that linked the river to a port. Smaller boats carried shipments of imports through the narrow channels that branched off into other parts of the city. When it was time to walk to the arena, the citizens of Opal Oasis came out to support their Sema Diose in throngs. Seas of people lined the streets, chanting Ocella's name as they walked into the procession. Whenever they waved, the cheers swelled to roars. People threw flowers and plush jaguars into the street, which Guerrero priests dressed in red robes gathered and loaded into a cart. They adored Ocella, which made absolutely no sense to Tio. He couldn't see how anyone would like the worst of Mediose, let alone a whole city. It was hard to see the city through the crowd, but Teal got glimpses of gyms and sports bars. They even passed by a fancy shop that Teal thought was a jewelry store at first until he realized the glass displays held beautifully crafted weapons. The third arena had been transformed into a tropical forest in the middle of the desert city. Mist hung in the dense tree canopies, and even the air smelled thickly of damp soil. Their parents waited for them on a platform. The Jumbotron showed Verdad and Chisme in conversation, obviously emceeing the trial, but impossible to hear. The cheers for Scylla were louder here. A corner of the stands had even constructed a tifo of Scylla's head, mid-snarl. There must have been more than 100 people acting in unison to hold a banner above their heads. Our lands have been peaceful for thousands of years, Luna said when everyone was gathered at the platform. The semidioses took their usual places in front of their godly parents. But that doesn't mean our people wanted to live without the thrill of battle. Standing next to her, Diose Guerrero grinned proudly, their fists gently resting on their hips. Phantasma kept throwing them nervous glances from the corner of her eye. In ancient times, cities would invade one another to capture prominent figures, not to kill them, not even for ransom, but simply to prove they could. These were non-violent and honorable competitions. We recreate the tradition of the bloodless battle in today's trial. You'll be competing in pairs. If you're touched by someone on the other team, you're captured and unable to capture anyone else. You'll be marked as captured with the glyph of the semidioses who captured you, she said. Aristella's face brightened with a sharp smile as she locked eyes with Aurelio, who responded with a small nod. Everyone's head swiveled to silently search out a teammate until suddenly felt like he was back in school in need of a partner for biology class. The pairs will be decided by soul, Luna finished, like she had been waiting for them to get their hopes up before swiftly crushing them. Teal couldn't help smirking at the gold's disgruntled expressions. Aristella looked especially murderous, but he realized that this also applied to him. Shit. Semidiosis, please step forward and stand in the circle, Luna instructed, waving them on. Teal's mother pecked a kiss on the top of his head before he moved to join the others. Teal sent a silent prayer to Soul to take pity on him and pair him up with Zio or Nia, or at the very least, not Aristella or Arcello. All 10 semidioses stood in a circle facing one another, shifting uncomfortably as they waited to see how the pairings would be chosen. Teal looked around, waiting for something to happen, when his eyes snapped on Aurelio. Aurelio gave him a nod, just a small dip of his chin, that sent Teal's stomach tumbling. Murmuring broke out in the crowd, pulling his attention away. Above Marino's head, like it had been drawn mid-air, was the golden burning heart of Diosa Amor. Marino grinned across the circle at Desi, whose dazzling smile gleamed as matching glyph of Diosa Aqua's wave hovered over his own head. The Jumbotron displayed their portraits, side by side. Teal would have been happy with either boy as his own partner, but he held out hope to be paired with one of his friends. Sochi and Nazi were next. Again, he would have preferred them over the alternatives, but it seemed like Soul was taking pity on them and was pairing people who got along. That was until the next team was selected. The light of a glyph appearing over Zio's head immediately to his left caught Teal's attention. Hope lifted in his chest. Teal's head jerked up, hoping to see his own glyph, but no such luck. It was the jaguar head of Guerrero. That's not fair! Acelo's voice boomed. Across the circle, the Jedi of Mala Suerte illuminated above Acelo's head. And they were pissed. He's bad luck! He's gonna make me lose! Acelo complained. Instantly, Teal's ears rang. He could see ripple through the rest of the group as people winced and clamped their jaws shut. Teal pressed his tongue between his teeth as Mala Suerte's barely contained rage thrummed throughout the arena. Diose Guerrero flicked the back of Acelo's shaved head and growled a warning under his breath. Do you have so little faith in your own skill that we rely on your partner to carry the weight of your team? Luna said in a cool, even voice. Acelo's mouth opened and closed uselessly like a fish's. Nia snorted and Teal used all of his willpower to not react. Or are you questioning the will of Soul? Again, Luna added. Acelo's mouth snapped shut. Poor Zio shrank under the attention, shoulders hunching up to his ears, while his dad loomed behind him, looking ready to pull the teeth out of anyone else who dared to say something against his son. Teal reached over and lightly knocked his knuckles against Zio's arm. Don't worry, it'll be okay, he murmured, knowing full well that was a lie. Zio kept his eyes trained on the ground, toying with his bracelet. Now Teal was worried, not only for Zio but for himself. Nia, Aurelia, and Aristella were the only options left. Any last hope he had was dashed as Aristella's and Nia's glyphs appeared above each other's heads. Aristella's full lips pressed into a hard line as she looked back and forth between Nia and her brother, high ponytail whipping. Nia rolled her eyes as she adjusted one of her braids. Get over yourself, she grumbled under her breath, sounding annoyed but mostly inconvenienced. With Nia and Aristella teamed up, that meant Teal's chest clenched. He didn't need to look up to know what glyph was there, and it crushed him. The quetzal of Teal's mom glowed above Aurelio. So it really couldn't cut him a break, could they? Aurelio still smiled for the crowd, but in a way that looked like it took effort. Tio had to hand it to him. Aurelio was good at covering up his emotions. It was a skill Tio knew he severely lacked. He frowned, trying to get a read on Aurelio's reaction. The boy's entire focus was on Luna, awaiting further instruction. Trade you, Nia said under her breath. As much as he hated to admit it, Aurelio was an incredibly skilled competitor, and Tio was definitely not. Tio could feel the impending humiliation. Aurelio might have been willing to help him prepare in training, but that didn't mean he wanted to team up with the Jade. This trial is not timed and will end when the last team, or person, is left standing, Luna said, waving them toward the bridge that led to the arena. It's time to get into position. Don't worry, Tio said discreetly to Zio as they fell into line behind Luna. Nia and I will come find you as quickly as possible. Nia and I are in agreement. Just try your best not to get tagged, okay? Zio nodded, but he didn't look reassured. His face was sickly pale and he kept shooting nervous glances at Estella, who moodily stomped after Luna like a toddler. If they could find each other and regroup, they could play defense and outlast the others for as long as possible. Until then, it was him and Aurelio. Partners. Each team started at the outer edge of the island, equidistant from one another. There were only about 10 feet between the water's edge and the tree line, making it impossible to see where everyone else was. Standing next to Aurelio, Tio felt ridiculous. While Aurelio was tall and broad with that heroic stoicism, Tio was gangly and messy-haired and severely lacking in valor. He did his best to stand straight and keep his wings neatly folded against his back as Aurelio stood perfectly poised, ready to take off. You ready? Aurelio asked, finally speaking to him for the first time since they were paired up. Of course I am, Tio shot back, keeping his eyes on the forest ahead and refusing to look over. In the distance, Mariachi's cornet sounded and Tio's watch buzzed on his wrist. Tio and Aurelio ran straight into the trees. Immediately, Tio was hit with a wall of hot, damp air. It was still and heavy. No breeze managed to break through the dense foliage. It seeped into his skin, prickling sweat across his brow. Taking a breath felt suffocating. With the sun blocked out by the dense canopy overhead, they were plunged into gloomy darkness. The rainforest was a sea of skinny rubber trees and bushy palms, towering well over 100 feet tall. The thick, woody vines of lianas draped over everything, threatening to snag Tio if he stepped wrong. Luckily, the lack of light made it impossible for anything to grow on the forest floor other than short zate trees. They're largely desperately reaching for any bit of sun. What's the plan? Tio asked, his concentration split between keeping his wings folded so they didn't get caught in something and trying to breathe in the heavy, unrelenting heat. Divide and conquer? Aurelio suggested, not even the slightest bit out of breath. Does that ever actually work? Tio puffed. Aurelio was already trying to get rid of him. Sometimes. I mean, this is basically a fancy game of freeze tag. Aurelio sighed. I don't know what that means. Come on, Golden Boy, you're the one with the fancy education. Shouldn't you have some tips? Don't get tagged. Oh, great, thank you. That was incredibly helpful. Don't be so loud or the others will hear you, Aurelio said as they jumped over a fallen log, one much more graceful than the other. It was hard to be quiet when he was already panting like a dog. Tio was running as fast as he could, but it was obvious Aurelio was holding back in order to keep pace with him. You know, in horror movies, splitting up is what always gets people murdered, Tio pointed out. I don't watch movies, Aurelio said plainly. You what? Tio spluttered. His foot caught on a root and he pitched forward. Luckily, Aurelio caught his upper arm and yanked him back upright, not even breaking his stride. As Tio scrambled to his feet, his gaze slipped toward the other boy, and found the vaguest hint of a smile on his lips. What kind of torture are they putting you through in that place? Tio demanded. Focus, bird brain, Aurelio told him. Tio rammed his shoulder into him. Shut up! Aurelio didn't even break his stride, but he did grin, which was nice. So nice, in fact, it took Tio a moment to realize there were voices up ahead. I'll go left, you go right, Aurelio said sternly, an overly intense expression back on his face. I'll go left, you go right, Tio said, not wanting to take orders from a gold. He cut across Aurelio's path before the other boy could stop him. Tio was half convinced Aurelio was trying to ditch him, but it didn't matter. Tio was going to ditch him first to go find Zio. That was his top priority. He heard heavy footfalls just in time for Estella to crash through the trees and launch themselves into Tio's path. With a strangled shout, Tio slipped his wings down, propelling himself high enough that Estella tackled empty air. Tio landed again as Estella tumbled to the ground, crashing into the base of a tree. Undeterred, they got back on their feet. Get over here! They snarled. Yikes! Hard pass! Tio said, quickly backing up. Estella charged him at him like a bull. Putting his blue and green wings as best he could, Tio launched himself from the ground again. He was off balance, tipping back and forth as he got higher. His desperately flapping wings crashed into foliage, startling a group of red-eyed tree frogs. By some miracle of soul, Tio was able to make it to the lower boughs of the canopy. Or at least, he climbed into a trunk and held on for dear life. Come back down here! Stella shouted, their face red as they paced back and forth at the base of the tree like an angry jaguar. I'm good, Tio called down, getting a firmer grip. The branches at least seemed strong enough to support his weight. You can't stay up there forever. A laugh bubbled in Tio's throat as he basked in how he'd managed to outsmart Ocello. Yeah, I definitely can. Taking up the challenge, Ocello stomped over to the tree. With a grunt, they transformed, muscles bulging. What are you going to do, tear the tree down? Tio asked, condescension dripping from his voice. Ocello threw their hands at their sides, unsheathing their claws. They sank them into the soft bark and very quickly began to scale the trunk. Tio had forgotten jaguars could climb trees. Abandoning ship, Tio scrambled down the branch and onto another tree. Luckily, the canopy was so dense with tangled branches that, with the help of his wings, it was relatively easy to leap from bough to bough. Bark scraped against his palms and leaves snarled in his hair as Tio raced from one tree to the next. The dense foliage kept him hidden, and soon enough he'd lost Ocello, their angry shouts fading behind him. Tio used the canopy to travel deeper into the rainforest. Going to the heat of the arena seemed like a good plan, since that was probably where the others were headed. He needed to find Zio and Nia before either of them got tagged. Tio felt a little bad leaving his teammate behind. It was like Aurelia was relying on him to win the trial. The damp leaves provided ample cover, and being this high up meant he could sneak around without drawing attention to himself. After a few minutes of running nothing but an army of weaver ants and a chill little sloth, Tio got worried. But then he heard a commotion up ahead and followed the sound. He hopped into a strangler tree, his wings helping him keep balance as he crouched low on a branch. In the middle of a clearing stood a huge kapok tree. The bottom section of the tree was large bouts of roots plunging into the soil, and sitting at the base was Zio. A wide grin split Tio's face. Finally, something had gone right. He was about to drop down to Zio, but something about the way the boy was sitting made him pause. He was sitting cross-legged, his hands in his laps, but slumped onto his side. The position of his body was strange, too stiff to be normal. That was when Tio spotted the glyphs hovering over his head. The wave of Diosa Agua and the burning heart of Diosa Amor. Tio's stomach clenched. Zio was already tagged, and the culprit was still there. But as he stood with his back to Zio just a few feet away, his attention caught on what had drawn Tio to the clearing in the first place. Nia and Aristella were in an all-out fight. Aristella threw balls of fire at Nia, who deftly jumped out of the way before slinging a golden spear like a javelin. Aristella ducked just in time, and the golden weapon sank into the trees with a thunk. "You're always doing this!" Aristella shouted, her face violent red. "Doing what?" Nia demanded, teeth bared. Their enraged gazes were locked, but there was something very wrong about them. Nia's eyes were their usual shade of hazel brown, but black. Aristella's eyes had changed too, and the skin around her eyes was dark, almost bruised looking. Was it a trick of the light? The shadows of the canopies? "Barreling through everything like an avalanche!" Aristella snarled. "At least I'm a natural disaster, you grease fire!" Aristella fumed. In one quick movement, she extended her arms and brought her hands together, palms facing toward Nia. Whoosh! Fire exploded from her hands like a flamethrower. Tio lost his footing for a moment, panic cried lodging in his throat, but Nia was fast. She threw her arm up and a large, silvery shield materialized. Nia ducked behind it, saving herself from the licking flames. The metal grew hot, glowing a deep, angry orange, but thankfully not melting. Tio ground his teeth. He wanted to shout at them, tell them they were acting like complete fools. They were on the same damn team! Why were they fighting each other? But he didn't, because Desi was completely distracted by their temper tantrums. If Zio was already out of the game, Tio could at least avenge him by taking out Desi. Anger swelled in Tio's chest and clouded any thought other than make Desi pay. He dropped from the tree, angling his wings to slow down on Desi. He stretched his wings out like Aurelia had shown him, but the sinewy new muscles weren't strong enough to stop the momentum of his body as he flung himself forward. Tio cried out. Searing pains tore through his shoulders. Desi must have felt the air shift and jerked to look over his shoulder. His eyes locked onto Tio's, wide with surprise. Tio flung himself forward, reaching for the other boy. He smirked, knowing it was too late for Desi to evade him. But then something strange happened. Desi didn't jerk back or even have the common decency to acknowledge defeat. Instead, Desi smiled. And in that moment, Tio knew he'd fucked up. He tagged Desi's arm. Something like a static shock stunned Tio's fingertips and raised up his arm. Immediately, Desi's body went rigid, and he fell to the side, Tio's and Aurelia's glyphs appearing above him. At the same time, a wave of drowsiness washed over Tio. He stumbled forward, swaying on his feet. The anger he'd felt moments before had completely dissolved. Tio frowned, trying to remember why he was upset to begin with. Suddenly, Tio didn't even care about why he had been angry. Instead, something warm and sweet like honey spread through his body, from the top of his head to the tips of his toes. A deep, satisfying breath filled his lungs, and when he exhaled, his arms and wings went limp as all his muscles relaxed. He felt good, really good, and completely at ease. It reminded him of summer afternoons, lying out in the sun on the docks of the canals after a long day of swimming. He wanted to curl up and take a nap. Teal knew there were other people around, but through the fog in his head, he didn't care about them. There was nothing but shadowy figures, completely inconsequential, when he totally turned and Desi came into sharp focus. Desi smiled up at him, and every nerve in Teal's body tingled. Desi was so perfect. Why weren't he and Desi better friends? Teal bet they had loads in common. Like that they both thought Desi was the prettiest boy to ever live. And he was! How had Teal never noticed it before? With a sigh of relief, Teal dropped to his knees and scooted over to Desi's side. Lying his head on Desi's shoulder, Teal took another deep breath and closed his eyes. He felt like he was on the receiving end of the world's warmest hug. Through the haze, someone called his name, but Teal ignored it. As long as he was with Desi, he would be happy. As long as he was with Desi, he was safe and nothing could go wrong. He crawled closer, squeezing Desi's arm as his wings draped over them. He could fall asleep right there on the jungle floor, knowing nothing bad would ever happen. Someone shook his shoulder, rough. Go away, Teal grumbled, knocking them back before pressing his face into Desi's neck. Unceremoniously, Teal was dragged to his feet. Snap out of it, the person said, stern and loud. Teal cringed. Being taken from Desi's side sent a deep ache tearing through Teal's chest. His skin crawled and itched. He needed Desi, needed the sense of safety and comfort. Without Desi, something terrible would happen to him. Panic squeezed Teal's throat with an iron grip. Leave me alone! He thrashed and fought, struggling to break free of his captor. But they refused to let him go. Stop, they ordered, squeezing his upper arms and shaking him. Teal's heart raced, and his vision started to clear. Before him, Aurelio's face came into focus. His expression was taut, fiery eyes blazing. Aurelio gave off his own heat. Not Desi's gentle warmth, but an intense burn that made Teal's skin prickle beneath Aurelio's touch. You need to get away from Desi. Teal seethed. Aurelio, who only caused him hurt and heartache, wanted to take him away from the only person who made him happy. No! Teal wrenched himself free and dove back to Desi's side. Instantly, the sleepy contentment quelled the rising pain and panic. What you're feeling isn't real. Teal glared up at Aurelio, eyes stinging and throat burning. What a terrible, cruel thing to say. Go away, Teal shouted, desperate to chase down the euphoria that Desi made him feel. Aurelio was ruining it. Aurelio ruined everything. Aurelio's eyes flicked past Teal's shoulder. He leapt to his feet and hurled a ball of fire. Teal ducked and threw himself across Desi. When he looked up, Marino had entered the clearing. Fire burned to the base of the tree next to him. When Aurelio closed his fist, it immediately went out. Marino stood, arms twisting and pulling rhythmically as a stream of water curled around him, like a silvery blue snake circling him mid-air. Teal attacked his partner, and I was looking for retribution. Aurelio marched away from Teal and Desi, igniting twin flames in his palms. For a moment, they stared at each other down, and then in a blink, they charged each other, a flurry of fire, water, and hissing steam. Teal, watch out! Nia's voice rang out. Aristella, so speared across her cheek, was sprinting for Teal, a fierce look of determination on her face. Teal didn't even care. If she wanted to tag him, he'd let her as long as he could stay with Desi. But before she could get closer, a golden net flew through the air and wrapped itself around Aristella, knocking her to the ground. Aristella let out a furious noise as she thrashed, trying to get herself free as Nia caught up to her. Traitor! Aristella screeched, staring up at Nia from the floor. Catching her breath, Nia propped her fist on her hip and rolled her eyes. Bite me, princess. Aristella slammed her fist into the ground. Fire ignited, covering her entire body. Through the flames, Teal watched as the golden netting melted and Aristella was back on her feet. Damn it, Nia groaned before Aristella chucked a ball of fire at her head. The two teammates went back to battling each other in a flurry of flames and slashing metal, disappearing through the trees. Teal crouched next to Desi, ready to fight Aurelio off again, but Aurelio's focus was on Marino. As the other boys slung streams of water at him, Aurelio ducked and dodged out of the way, slowly edging close until he was standing right in front of Teal. Before Teal could figure out what the hell he was doing, Aurelio rolled to his left, and a heavy stream of water sprayed Teal directly in the face. It shot up his nostrils and completely doused him. Teal's lungs tightened as the icy water sent a shock through his system. He coughed and spluttered, shaking the water from his face. What the hell? A hand grabbed his arm and hauled him to his feet. Have you snapped out of it yet? Aurelio demanded, irritation edging his voice as he scowled at Teal. Snapped out of what? Snapped out of it? The hell happened? Teal asked, wiping water from his eyes. Desi happened. Before Aurelio could elaborate, he shoved Teal back and darted out of the way as another stream of water struck the kapok tree. Marino stood opposite them, looking aggravated and worse for wear. Aurelio also looked rough. Teal couldn't remember seeing him so sweaty and out of breath. Desi? Teal looked back to see where Desi was on the ground, still frozen but now with a bemused expression on his face. Teal's heart sank. Had he been cuddling Desi in the middle of the trial in front of everyone on television? Oh my gods. Addictive contentment, Aurelio said. With effort, he threw another fireball at Marino, who dodged out of its way. Idiot! Humac had warned him, and he'd even seen himself and even seen it himself during the second trial when Desi touched the bullhorn rooster. Too clearly moved away from Desi, afraid he'd get sucked into his powers again. Shit, did I make a complete ass out of myself? He hissed. A bit, Aurelio agreed, out of breath. Tio looked over to Zio, who was still frozen in place but otherwise looking okay. Getting tied out first would not be good for the younger boys' rankings, but that was something they could worry about later. Time was not on their side. Marino made another attack, and this time Tio threw his wing out, doing his best to shoot himself and Zio. The stream of water had the strength of a fire hose. It hit Tio with brute force, tearing off a few feathers. He cursed loudly. I'll handle Marino, Aurelio said, moving away from Tio and the others. Tio fronted him, confused. Are you sure? Aurelio nodded, attention went back to Marino as he ignited flames in his hands. Go find someone to tag, he said, expression pinching. And don't get caught. He warmed Tio's cheeks as Aurelio sparked his flinted gloves and threw up a wall of fire. He didn't need to be told twice. Pushing off with his legs as hard as he could, Tio took off, back into the cover of the canopy, leaving Aurelio behind to hopefully overtake Marino. Things weren't going smoothly, but they weren't going badly either. At least Tio and Aurelio weren't at each other's throats like Nia and Aristella. Tio had even managed to tag Desi. Now he just needed to find someone else to tag, but that was easy for Aurelio to say. Tio was still a jade in an arena full of golds. The only upper hand he had was his wings. If he was going to take someone else down, he'd have to be sneaky about it. Tio moved through the canopy, going as quickly as he could without making too much noise. The wind against his cheeks and rippling through his fingers felt euphoric. Tio made a wide circle around where he left Aurelio so he'd be able to find him again if he got into trouble. The concept that he was actually relying on Aurelio for anything was still absolutely wild, but he had to play the game. When he heard a commotion, Tio followed the sound through the trees. Apparently Aristella and Nia had come to their senses. Maybe the former had finally killed the latter, because they found Otzi and Aristella battling it out. It was a strange game of cat and mouse, both dancing around each other, but with Otzi clearly on the defense as Aristella relentlessly lunged forward. Otzi threw lightning, keeping Aristella back, but just barely. Tio felt kind of bad for Otzi, but not enough to get between the two powerful goals, so he went on his way. Otzi would keep Aristella busy until Aristella inevitably tagged her. Oh my gods, will you chill? Neo's voice cut the trees. Leaf sent Tio racing through the boughs. When he found her, Neo was standing over Aristella, who was lying face down on the ground. Nia's and Aristella's glyphs hung over their head. There you are, Tio said, dropping down to her side. Here I am, Nia smiled brightly. Are you okay? He searched her eyes. The black was gone, leaving them their usual shade of hazel brown. Nia exhaled between pursed lips. Of course I am. I told down meathead, she said, probably pointing to where Aristella glared up at them from the ground, their cheek pressed in the dirt, absolutely seething. Not that it was that difficult, Nia continued. She crossed her arms and gave Aristella a disapproving look. You know, if you didn't lose your temper so quick, it wouldn't be so easy to trick you. Stella's body jerked. Tio took a large step back. If anyone could somehow manage to break the magical bindings of the trial, it'd be Estella, and Tio would not want to be in their way. Nia nudged them with her foot. Calm down! Speaking of temper, I thought you and Estella were going to murder each other, Tio said, looking around in case she decided to jump out. Nia frowned and shook her head. I swear I'm usually better at ignoring her, but it's like ever since the trial started, I just can't help myself, you know? She said, rubbing her eyes. Yeah, I get it, Tio agreed. Maybe the stress of the trials is getting to all of them. So what's the plan? Nia asked, turning to Tio. Why do I have to come up with the plan? You're the gold, he shot back. Yeah, but you're like the plan guy. The plan was to keep Zio from getting tagged, he grumbled. Well, that didn't work out, so what's plan B? I need to come up with plan A and plan B? You're the plan guy. Two people came crashing through the trees. Both Nia and Tio and Nia screamed. She reached out to grab Tio, but Tio quickly twisted out of reach. You almost tagged me! I'm sorry, I got scared! Marino had chased Aurelio into the clearing, relentlessly blasting him with water. Aurelio threw his arms up in an attempt to shield himself, but was useless against the deluge. Tio waited for Aurelio to get up and flamethrower Marino's ass, but he didn't. With another hit of water, Aurelio was knocked off balance, dropping down on his knee. Your partner's not looking so good, Nia said wearily. Tio never thought he'd see the day when Aurelio was bested. Didn't make any sense, but then he realized. Marino was a semi-dios of water, and Aurelio was a semi-dios of fire. They were opposing elements. He remembered poring over Zio's trading cards and the weaknesses listed at the bottom. Marino was fire and heat, and Aurelio's was water and cold. And if he was drenched, that meant his flint gloves didn't work. He needed help. Thinking fast, Tio took off into the air and dropped down in front of Aurelio's just time to get hit with a face full of water. He threw up his wings to shield himself. This time, Marino's hit wasn't as hard. Maybe he was running out of steam, too. As the water sprayed uselessly against his wings, Tio looked down to where Aurelio was crouched behind him. You good? He asked. Aurelio looked up at him more than a little dazed. His cheeks were red and his soaked clothes clung to his heavy, heaving chest as he tried to catch his breath. Aurelio wiped the water from his face before nodding, a determined look in his eyes. Marino was closing in. One step closer and he'd be able to reach out and tag Teal's wings. Take off, Aurelio told him, his attention focused ahead. His stubborn ass was going to get himself tagged. But you, now! Teal flew up into the air, well over Marino's head. Marino lunged forward, only to stop at empty air, as Aurelio dove at Marino's feet, tagging his right leg. Instantly, Marino's body locked up and he toppled to the muddy ground. Teal whooped, punching his arm into the air, which nearly made him fall, but he quickly recovered. Aurelio pushed himself up from the ground, unsteady but upright. Now he and Aurelio had both tagged someone. By some miracle of soul, they actually stood a chance of winning this trial. The victory, however, was short-lived. Sanofa! Down below, Nia was flat on her back, her wrists and ankles bound by vines. So she stood a few feet away, a triumphant grin on her face as she used the vines like rope to drag Nia toward her. Teal swooped down, landing so hard he nearly fell over. He raced to Nia, grabbed the vines, and pulled, trying to wrench them free of Xochitl's grip, but the springtime Semidiosa was stronger than him. Do you remember what Xochitl's weakness is? Teal demanded, holding on for dear life. No, I thought you knew, Nia answered as she wrangled with the vines. Cut the vines! I can't, my hands are stuck. Nia struggled against the restraints, but it was no use. With a hard yank, Xochitl knocked Teal off balance. He scrambled to hold on, digging his heels into the dirt, but it did little to slow Xochitl down. This was a tug of war that Teal was not going to win. In a flash of orange light, flames cut through Teal's vision, severing the vines. Teal stomped out the charred ends as Xochitl let out an incoherent shout of anger. Aurelio was back on his feet, small flames dancing across his fingers. With the vines loose, Nia wrenched her arms apart, snapping her bindings. Xochitl sprinted toward them, but before she could tag Teal, Nia slammed her open hand against the ground and made a fist. The mud swallowed Xochitl's feet up to her ankles, knocking her forward. While she was still disoriented, Nia quickly tagged Xochitl's arm. I didn't know you could do that, Teal gaped. Nia got to her feet and tossed her braid over her shoulder. I've got loads of tricks you don't know about, she told him, grinning ear to ear. Come on. Nia offered her hand to help him up. Teal started to reach for it. Don't! Aurelio shouted. Teal jerked his hand back. You were going to tag me? Nia laughed and shrugged her shoulders. It was worth a shot. Teal glared up at her. We're supposed to be working together. We're the only 4 left. Nia pointed out with a huff. It's either me or... Blazing white light exploded before Teal's eyes, followed by a thunderous boom. When his vision cleared, Nia was spread out on her side, unmoving. Fresh cut across her cheek dripped golden blood. Ati stood behind her, fists raised and poised as she looked between Teal and Aurelio. Teal's heart clenched painfully in his chest. Nia! He moved a race to her side, but Aurelio's voice stopped him. She's fine. If you touch her now, you'll get electrocuted too, he warned, keeping his eyes on Ati. Small flickers of lightning danced across Nia's body. She's not fine. She's unconscious, Teal barked. She's gotten set by Ati dozens of times, Aurelio said calmly. Teal glared, but Aurelio grinned. Ready to finish this or what? I don't want to get struck by lightning again. He hadn't exactly had a good reaction the first time. She's been throwing a lot of bolts, which means she's low on power, Aurelio said, nodding in Ati's direction. Looking at her now, Teal could see the quick rise and fall of her chest. The silvery ribbons she always wore braided into her hair were falling out, crooked and unraveling. Ati was tired but determined. If she was still standing, that meant she must have won the fight between her and Aristella. Teal would have paid good money to see the look on Aristella's face when Ati tagged her. How many people did you tag? Teal asked, moving to Aurelio's side. 1. Me too. A grin curled Teal's lips. Aurelio glanced at him from the corner of his eye, arching an eyebrow. Race you, Teal said. Aurelio exhaled sharply through his nose. Unless you're scared. Aurelio smiled and warmth flooded Teal's chest. On a count of 3. A laugh went into Teal's throat. 1, 2. Teal ran as fast as he could. Ati turned and took off through the trees. Took less than 5 steps for Aurelio to catch up and fall into stride next to Teal. Ati wove through the trees in an attempt to lose them. She spun around and threw up a wall of rain, but it was little more than a drizzle and did nothing to slow them down. Try as she might, Ati started to falter. As they closed in, Aurelio lengthened his stride, gradually pulling ahead. Adrenaline and stubborn determination coursed through Teal's veins. He urged himself to go harder, to run faster, go harder, push, push, push. A slick, mossy log lay across the path and Ati jumped over it. Teal and Aurelio got to it at the same time, but instead of jumping over it, Teal jumped onto the log and launched himself into the air. Teal thrust his wings down and shot forward, tagging Ati between her shoulder blades. Her body locked up and fell to the ground. Overhead, Dios Mariachi's cornets sang the end of the trial as Teal's watch vibrated. Teal tumbled through the air and hit the ground hard, somersaulting a couple times before skating to a stop at the base of the trees. His lungs burned and several parts of his body were definitely bruised, but it was totally worth it. Teal raised his hands over his head. We won! He announced, breathless and half drunk on victory. He couldn't believe it. He'd actually gotten through a trial without complete disaster. And, more than that, he tagged 2 golds. Aurelio walked over to Tio. I did it! Tio beamed up at him, still barely able to believe it himself. You did, Aurelio agreed, holding out his hand for Tio to take. Delirious laughter bubbled in Tio's chest as he was pulled to his feet. Aurelio's tight grip was only on his hand for a moment, but the sensation lingered like a burn. I can't believe it, Tio said, bending over and bracing his hands on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. That was awesome! Aurelio looked at him, an amused look on his handsome face. It wasn't exactly a smile, but it was definitely adjacent. He seemed to have recovered from Marino's attack. Even as he stood there, Aurelio's normally a high body heat was drying his clothes, whips of steam billowing off his shoulders. He looked great, actually. They chased Otzi through the rainforest, and he wasn't even winded. Tio frowned. Wait, he said, forcing himself to stand upright. Something didn't add up right. If Aurelio was still weak from Marino's attack, then he should look haggard right now. But he didn't. And if he'd recovered already, then Aurelio easily should have outrun him in a matter of seconds. Did you let me win? Tio demanded. I don't know what you're talking about, Aurelio said, cleaning his soot-covered hands, the gold armbands off on the hem of his shirt. Yes, you do! Without looking up, he turned around and started walking. Come on, it's time for the rankings. Tio fumed and stunned after him. Get back here, you bastard!